What's up? Welcome to neonmushroom. I'm Adrian, not Calvin Traeger, or Trigger, as he's known online. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying his videos. I've been pretty impressed with his editing style and the content he's been putting out on our gameplay footage. Just a little bit of transparency. They do say you're supposed to underpromise and overdeliver. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'm a huge fan of transparency. You guys saw a video go up by Mr. Calvin on Monday. Today is Wednesday, and you're watching a video from me. If all goes well, on Friday you'll see another video from Calvin, and then on Saturday you'll see another video from me. Now, if everything goes according to plan, this should be the entire month of November. Every week you should see this pattern repeat itself up until the end of November. Why? Because we have some plans moving into 2021, and a lot of that involves cranking out a bunch of gameplay right now to really start to find what type of editing we want to do on these videos, how we want to present this gameplay footage. So again, just a reminder, if any of you have any constructive criticism, like the gentleman who's been talking recently about including deck lists in the description, by the way, we see that, this is something we want to do. We have a lot of players. It's kind of a bigger thing than it seems like. It's not just, yeah, we're going to upload our deck lists. There's like 10 players that play with us regularly, and they all have like upwards of like 12 decks. Some of them, I only have like 5. All mine are uploaded, but I don't really want to selectively give you guys deck lists. I want to get it to the point where in the description, one of the first thing you'll see is deck lists. So look forward to that. We will be providing deck lists. That said, that was like a minute long rant. Let's go ahead and get into the game. This is an EDH/Commander gameplay video, so let's look at what decks everyone's going to be playing, who's going to be playing them, and the opening hands. Alrighty, first up we have Ryan's Oloro deck being piloted by Mr. Jake Duffy. He does keep a 7-card hand with Adarkar Wastes, Glacial Fortress, Terramorphic Expanse, Cyclonic Rift, a Mirror Maid, Ghostly Prison, and the fresh out of Zendikar Rising, Angel of Destiny. And I will be bringing you yet another game with Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. I will also keep a 7-card hand with Island, Urborg, a Fairy Seer, Muddle the Mixture, Azra's Smoke Shaper, Brazen Borrower, and a Murderous Cut. Up next, we have another deck that was built by Ryan, this time being piloted by Ryan himself. That's going to be his Aminatou deck. He keeps a 6-card hand with Snow-Covered Plains, Temple of Silence, Orzhov Signet, Soul Herder, Utter End, and a Panharmonicon, and I don't know what he shipped because he refused to show it to the camera at the beginning of the game. And then finally we have Ajdin playing as Lord Windgrace deck. He'll be keeping a 6-card hand with a Luxury Suite, Forest, a Swamp, Elvish Reclaimer, an Assassin's Trophy, a Roiling Regrowth, and he does ship a copy of Azusa, Lost But Seeking. Jake wins the die roll, so he's going to lead off on a copy of Glacial Fortress tapped, passing the turn to me. I'm going to play that island from my opening hand, tap it for blue, and I'll play Fairy Seer. With Fairy Seer's trigger, I'll scry 2, and I'll put them both on the bottom, passing the turn over to Ryan. Ryan's going to play Temple of Silence tapped. He'll scry, he'll decide to keep it on top, and pass the turn to Ajdin, who will play a Forest, tap it for green, and play Elvish Reclaimer, passing the turn back to Jake for the second turn cycle. Jake will play a basic island as his land for turn, and he's going to tap out for a Blind Obedience. With nothing else, we move to my turn. I'll untap and draw a card. Then I'm going to play a Swamp as my land for turn, and I'm going to attack Ryan for 1. Obviously before damage, but after blockers, I'm going to go ahead and ninjutsu in Yuriko in place of the Fairy Seer. At that point, I'm going to reveal off the top of my library a Sunken Ruins and put that into my hand. I'll move to discard, discarding Urborg as to not fix my opponent's mana. We'll move to Ryan's turn. He'll play Snow-Covered Plains, tap 2, and play an Orzhov Signet, which enters tapped. Then we're going to move to Ajdin's turn. He'll untap, upkeep, draw for turn, play a Swamp, and simply pass the turn. Jake's going to play a basic Plains as his land for turn, and he'll tap out yet again, this time for a copy of Ghostly Prison. With nothing else, we'll move over to my third turn. I'll draw my card, and then I'm going to play that Sunken Ruins I drew last turn off Yuriko. Then I'm going to tap for 1 blue, and I'll play that Fairy Seer yet again to scry 2. I see something I like, so I'll put 1 on top and then 1 on bottom, and I'll attack Ryan with Yuriko again, this time allowing the trigger to resolve, and I will reveal a Temporal Trespass, dealing 11 to everybody. I'll add that to my hand and pass the turn over to Ryan. Ryan will untap, and sadly has no actions. At the end of his turn, Ajdin will cycle Kanganslow. He'll draw a card, untap, and then draw for turn. Ajdin will play Luxury Suite as his land for turn, and with nothing else, he's going to pass the turn over to Jake. Jake will play a Sea of Clouds as his land for turn, and sadly has no other action, so he'll pass the turn to me. I'll play another island as my land for turn, and I'm going to head straight into combat and attack Ryan for 2. He declares no blocks, so I'm going to ninjutsu in Azra's Smoke Shaper in place of the Fairy Seer, adding the Fairy to my hand, and we're going to go to combat damage. He'll take 4 from 2 ninjas. This will trigger Yuriko twice. I'll hit a land and deal 0, and then I'll hit Jace the Mind Sculptor, dealing 4 to everybody, everyone's size, and I add it to my hand. Second main phase, I'll play Phyrexian Walker, and I'll discard that Fairy Seer, seeing how it's done all its work, and we'll pass to Ryan. Ryan will play Evolving Wilds, immediately cracking it. He's going to go get a snow-covered island, put it into play tapped, and we'll try to pass the turn to Ajdin, but Ajdin has a play. He's going to tap 1, 2, 3 mana and play Roiling Regrowth. Not wanting to see Lord Windgrace come down next turn, I'll respond with Muddle the Mixture to counter it, and we'll move over to Ajdin's turn. He'll untap, draw, and play a basic mountain as his land for turn. He'll tap 3 for an Evolution Sage, and before passing the turn, we remember that we're supposed to have tapped creatures because of that Blind Obedience. With nothing else, we'll move over to Jake's turn. He'll play a Darkar Waste as his land for turn, and then he will tap out and play Angel of Destiny. With nothing else, he passes the turn to me. Now you're going to get to find out why the whole table side. I'll play Tainted Isle as my land for turn, and I'll tap 4 for that Jace the Mind Sculptor, and I'll use its 0 ability to functionally brainstorm. I'll draw 3 cards and put 2 back on top, and I'll head into combat and attack Ryan again for 4 damage. He's going to take all of it, Yuriko is going to trigger twice, and I'll reveal Temporal Trespass, dealing 11 to everybody, and then Murderous Cut, dealing 5 to everybody. This does put Ryan out of the game. With nothing else, we'll move over to Ajdin's turn. He'll untap, draw, and play Wasteland as his land for turn, triggering Evolution Sage, proliferating nothing. Then he'll play Lord Windgrace, and he'll immediately tick it up to discard Ugin, and then he will draw a card off of that. It's not a land, so he does not draw 2. With nothing else, we're going to move over to Jake's turn. Jake gains 2 per his commander for the 6th time this game. He plays Terramorphic Expanse as his land for turn, and then plays Fountain of Renewal, deciding not to extort it for a reason I cannot figure out. Then I'll cast Murderous Cut, tapping 1 black, and delving 4 cards from my graveyard to hit his Angel of Destiny. That's all going to resolve, so I'm going to bin the Murderous Cut, he bins the Angel, and I'll put those delved cards into exile. We'll move to my turn, I'll untap and draw a card for turn. Then I'll play Darkwater Catacombs as my land for turn, and I'm going to 0 Jace to draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from my hand back on top. At this point, I'm going to pay 4 mana to pay for his Ghostly Prison because I want to attack Jake with 2 of my creatures. They're both ninjas. Before we head into combat damage, I do want to rearrange the way I tapped because I want a black to be untapped as well. Then we're going to head to combat damage, but before we can, he tries to Cyclonic Rift my Yuriko. I have a response. I'll cast Commandeer for free from my hand by exiling Cyclonic Rift of my own and a Brazen Borrower. I'm going to take his Cyclonic Rift and I'm going to use it on Lord Windgrace. That's all going to resolve, so Lord Windgrace gets bounced to hand, and then we go to damage. Yuriko is going to hit for 1, the Smoke Shaper for 3, I'll reveal Temporal Trespass off the top for 11, and then before using the second Injitsu trigger, I'll Vampiric Tutor, and I'm going to put a copy of Commit to Memory on top of my library, winning the game.
GG. GG.
Yuriko is fun!
Turn 6 is faster than turn 7. Calvin. For any of you who watched Calvin's last game, he won on turn 6. He's pretty proud. He did a good job. I won on turn 6, had to one-up him. Given I was not met with any amount of friction or resiliency from the other players for the most part. That said, neither was Calvin in the last game uploaded. Let's kind of get into how the game went and how everyone's decks performed. We'll start with the weakest performing deck, and that's probably going to come from Ryan. He was playing one of Ryan's 2 decks that were in the pod today, and that was his Aminatou deck. He mulled the 6. He kept 2 lands and a rock, and couldn't find his 3rd land drop until turn 4. Because of this, he couldn't use the Utter End in his hand to interact with my Yuriko, and that kind of pushed him out of the game because he wasn't able to develop a board presence, which gave me a route to keep attacking, and it doesn't matter who I'm attacking, Yuriko is going to hit all of my opponents. So as long as one person can't block, I'm in really good shape. He really didn't do much this game, which is unfortunate. That deck's actually really cool. It does the whole Deadeye Navigator, Paragon Drake, Runescarred Demon thing, and it's really interesting once it gets going, and he does have the tools to be able to survive the early game in most cases. This game was not an example of that game plan coming to fruition, so we'll kind of push him to the side and move right along in turn order to Ajdin. Ajdin's Lord Windgrace deck, even when it loses, even when it gets apparently decimated, because if you look at this game in a vacuum, it was just decimated. He wasn't really able to keep up at all because I moved so quickly. His game had a very good game plan, or his deck had a very good game plan that game. He had a 1-drop, he tried to play Roiling Regrowth, it was countered because I don't think I could have handled Lord Windgrace on turn 5. My Model the Mixture can't counter the Lord Windgrace because it's not an instant or sorcery, so I had to counter the Regrowth, because if he played the Lord Windgrace, he would have been able to draw a card and then minus it to get 2 lands back, and I can't really attack the Lord Windgrace because, well, it's not going to trigger my Yuriko, and that's not part of my game plan. My deck's not very good at answering Planeswalkers. But he kind of used his mana fairly effectively for turn 1, and then turn 3, 4, and then 5. He was able to tap a lot of his mana. I think he used probably like 2/3 of his mana that game. And the questionable play he didn't make was he did an Assassin's Trophy my Yuriko. I see why he didn't do that. That's a play line he's taken in the past before. It never works out quite right because he usually ends up ramping me, and then I redeploy Yuriko the next turn. In this case, I think it would have slowed the game down quite a bit, but I can see why maybe he didn't make that play. If I were him, I probably would have tried to Assassin's Trophy that Yuriko instead of cycling the Kangen slow. That would have been my play, but I'm not sure what else was in his hand. That said, if he had landed that Lord Windgrace, he did have the Evolution Sage, he would have been able to start to proliferate like 3 times a turn because of Evolution Sage's trigger in conjunction with Lord Windgrace's minus ability. So he minuses Lord Windgrace, gets back 2 lands, trigger proliferate twice, land for turn. Lord Windgrace is right back where he started. He's going to generate an insane amount of mana and can probably play a board wipe that I probably can't interact with. So that's exactly why we countered with Muddle the Mixture on his Whirling Regrowth. The game just went a little bit too fast for his deck to keep up. There actually are lines his deck could have gone through. He didn't have the opening hand for it, but his deck can actually compete even in that speed. Just in this pod, we did not see that. Last but not least, we have Jake. Jake was playing one of Ryan Foley's decks, and that was his Oloro, Ageless Ascetic. Is that how you pronounce that word? Ascetic? I think it's Ascetic. That deck's really cool. We saw some new cool cards like Angel of Destiny, and we saw some old hits like Blind Obedience and Ghostly Prison. Nothing wrong with any of these cards. Unfortunately, they didn't affect me in any meaningful way until the last turn, which I was able to pay for the Ghostly Prison. And the Blind Obedience was never extorted, which I was surprised by. He probably should have extorted the Fountain of Renewal. That said, I did have to use a Vampiric Tutor to go get a 10-drop at the end of the game because his Oloro was just hanging out and gaining him so much life that even though I was just revealing Temporal Trespass after Temporal Trespass, his life total was always above board. He wasn't able to win because that deck wants to have a super high life total and then use a win condition that cares about having a super high life total. So I was in the clear with that, but that could have gotten risky as well. My deck seems like it dominated, but if I hadn't won that turn, my window may have closed very quickly. Speaking of my window, let's talk about the victor. That's me, Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. I can't remember, but this might be the first time the deck's ever won on camera. And this is kind of my, Calvin's got a signature deck. He's got his Golos Super Friends deck. Yuriko's mine. Yuriko's the deck that I care a lot about. I dumped a ton of money into it. I really care about the aesthetic of the deck. You guys don't care about that type of stuff. You just want to see the list, I'm sure, and that will be coming very soon. My game plan was executed very well. It's kind of hard to mess it up once you know how the deck works. I kept a 2-lander with a 1-drop, and I will aggressively mulligan all the way down for a 3-card hand with 2 lands and a 1-drop. I will mulligan all the way to 3 until I see that. I went Mothdeath Changeling, Fairy Seer on turn 1, and that allows me to scry 2, and then when I ninjutsu out the Fairy Seer, I can keep reusing it, which is why we saw Temporal Trespass on the top of the library when I scryed 1 top, 1 bottom. At that point, we revealed Jace, and the Jace was kind of the MVP of the game because he let me show them Temporal Trespass, I think a grand total of 4 times throughout the game, and because of that, even the insane amount of life gain that Jake was able to accrue through his commander, it wasn't quite enough. Yuriko dealt upwards of, I didn't do the math, it's over 100 damage, well over 100 damage, it had to be because it killed everybody. Probably over 120, I don't know. And then one thing I want to point out about this game, and something newer players don't necessarily focus on or know about, mana is a resource that you want to use as much of as you can. In this game, I believe of my available like 19 mana that I could have spent throughout the course of the game, I only didn't spend 3. I used every mana, and then I used my Delve cards very effectively, my Delve cards being my 1 copy of Murderous Cut, to just basically juice every resource I could out of my deck, and because of that, I was able to go incredibly fast and be incredibly efficient and kind of operate like a really sharpened blade. That's why I like Yuriko so much. So if you're thinking about picking up the cards to build Yuriko and you're like, I don't know about it, pick up the cards to build Yuriko. I'll be sharing my list in the future. However, my list is very expensive. You do not need your list to be super expensive for Yuriko to be this awesome deck in your pot of decks. That said, that's all I have for you guys today, so that should wrap the video up. Mardu sucks. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.